The paper ripped in her hands before I could speak. My daughter's therapy schedule shredded into confetti on our porch. "Get that disgusting medical junk off this porch," Karen screamed, unaware federal law protected every document she just destroyed. She had no idea who I really was, or that tearing those papers would end her reign over Maple Creek Estates. I'm Elena Reyes, mother to 7-year-old Sophia, who has cerebral palsy, and by profession, a United States attorney. We'd moved to Maple Creek 3 years earlier, drawn by good schools, quiet streets, and a community pool Sophia loved. Karen Whitfield ruled the HOA board like a queen, her clipboard more feared than any police badge on our block. Neighbors whispered about fines for wrong-colored curtains, uneven grass, even a garden gnome deemed aesthetically inappropriate by her standards. I kept my job private, wanting Sophia to have a normal childhood, not a mother defined by courtroom battles and headlines. Karen noticed our modified minivan first, the one with the wheelchair ramp folded neatly against its side, parked in our driveway. "That thing lowers property values," she told me at a block party, smiling like she'd offered helpful advice, not an insult. The first violation notice arrived in April. Unsightly vehicle equipment visible from street. Remove within 10 days or face fines. I explained Sophia's van needed that ramp for her wheelchair, for therapy visits 3 times a week across town. Karen's response was a form letter, cold and generic, citing bylaws about uniform driveway appearances, without a shred of empathy. I appealed politely, attaching Sophia's medical documentation, hoping compassion would outweigh whatever power trip Karen was enjoying that month. Instead, a second notice appeared, doubling the fine, stapled crookedly to our door like a threat wrapped in bureaucracy. I attended my first HOA meeting, expecting reason, and found Karen presiding like a judge who'd already decided my guilt. "Rules apply to everyone equally," she declared, ignoring the ADA pamphlet I'd printed and placed carefully on the table. Another homeowner, an elderly man named Frank, tried defending me, only to receive his own citation the following week. Karen's husband, Dale, sat silently beside her, nodding at every ruling, apparently a board member himself, conveniently unopposed. I learned other families had faced similar treatment, quietly paying fines rather than fighting a woman who seemed untouchable here. My neighbor Priya confided that Karen once forced a widow to remove a ramp, calling it an eyesore for buyers. That detail chilled me, a pattern forming beneath Karen's polished HOA newsletters and cheerful community Facebook posts about neighborhood pride. I began documenting everything, an old habit from years building federal cases, though I told myself this was just paperwork. Sophia asked why the mean lady kept yelling about our car, her small voice more perceptive than any adult's excuse. I told her some people don't understand differences, hoping that lie would hold until this nonsense resolved itself quietly. It didn't. Karen escalated to certified letters, threatening a lien on our house over unpaid aesthetic violation fines. I paid the first fine simply to buy time, still hoping to keep my professional life separate from this dispute. Karen mistook my restraint for weakness, telling another neighbor I was finally learning how things work around here. She started timing Sophia's therapy van, noting arrival times in a notebook she called her compliance log publicly. One afternoon she blocked our driveway with her SUV, delaying Sophia's pickup for physical therapy by 20 tense minutes. I stayed calm outside, recording everything on my phone, while Karen smiled directly into the camera like she'd won. Surprisingly, things quieted for a few weeks after that video circulated among neighbors, embarrassing Karen into temporary silence. She sent a stiff apology letter, insisting it was a misunderstanding, and even removed one fine from our account. Sophia's therapy resumed without interruption, and I let myself believe maybe reason had finally reached Karen Whitfield's conscience. I focused back on work, deep in a federal fraud case, grateful for a break from suburban warfare at home. Frank told me Karen was acting different, almost pleasant, and I foolishly wondered if the worst had passed us. The calm shattered when Karen discovered Sophia's therapist visited our home twice weekly for in-house occupational therapy sessions. She claimed the therapist's parked car violated commercial vehicle bylaws. Despite it being an ordinary sedan with a small clinic sticker, Karen circulated a neighborhood email calling our home a makeshift medical facility, implying we were breaking zoning laws entirely. Families who'd once smiled at us now avoided eye contact. Swayed by Karen's carefully worded innuendo and false urgency, I requested a formal HOA hearing, citing ADA protections explicitly, determined to resolve this through proper documented channels. Karen postponed the hearing 3 times, each excuse thinner than the last, clearly stalling to wear down my patience. Meanwhile, fines accumulated silently in the background, threatening escalation toward collections and potential liens on our property. Dale started patrolling our street nightly, checking for violations, his flashlight sweeping our windows like we were criminals. Sophia grew anxious, associating the flashlight glow with fear, waking some nights asking if the mean man was outside. I filed a formal complaint with the county, attaching every notice, timestamped video, and Sophia's medical records as evidence. Karen apparently learned of my complaint and retaliated by proposing a new bylaw banning visible medical equipment community-wide. At the next meeting, she pushed the vote through quickly, before most working parents could even arrive to object. The bylaw passed 8-2, giving Karen legal cover to target every disabled resident's ramp, lift, or equipment. I stood and objected loudly, citing federal law. But Karen simply gavelled the meeting closed, smiling triumphantly at me. Walking home, Priya whispered that Karen had bragged about finally shutting down that lawyer lady's little disability card. That phrase, disability card, stayed lodged in my chest, a cruelty dressed up as neighborhood governance and civic duty. I began quietly gathering records from other targeted families, sensing a pattern too consistent to be simple coincidence anymore. Frank admitted Karen once told him disabled residents chose that lifestyle and shouldn't expect special treatment from the HOA. Another family, the Ortegas, revealed Karen fined them for a hearing dog sign, calling their service animal an unauthorized pet. I realized this wasn't about aesthetics anymore. Karen was systematically pushing disabled families out of Maple Creek estates entirely. Karen's tactics turned personal when she began following Sophia's therapy van, photographing it at doctors' offices across town. She posted those photos online, insinuating I was hiding something, fueling suspicion among neighbors who barely knew our family. I confronted her directly, asking why she was surveilling a disabled child instead of running the community responsibly. I run a tight ship, she snapped. And rule breakers like you always think you're above everyone else here. That night, someone slashed the tire on Sophia's therapy van, leaving a note reading "Follow the rules next time." I couldn't prove it was Karen, but her recent Facebook post about consequences for rule breakers felt disturbingly specific. I reported the vandalism to local police, who took the report but offered little hope of identifying a suspect quickly. Karen, undeterred, escalated further, sending Sophia's school a letter questioning our fitness as parents based on HOA violations. The school called me confused, since our violations were parking notices, not anything resembling actual child endangerment concerns. I realized Karen was weaponizing every institution she could reach, hoping fear and confusion would finally break our resolve. Dale confronted me in the driveway, insisting Sophia's ramp be removed by Friday, or face legal action from the board. I calmly informed him ADA protections superseded any HOA bylaw, watching his confidence falter for the very first time. That weekend, Karen organized a neighborhood safety meeting, clearly designed to publicly shame our family before the whole community. She stood before dozens of neighbors, projecting photos of our van, calling it proof of ongoing rule violations repeatedly. I walked in halfway through, Sophia's hand in mine, and the room fell into uncomfortable, guilty silence immediately. "Would you like to say this to her face?" asked, gesturing toward my daughter. who simply waved shyly. Karen faltered, but recovered fast, insisting rules are rules, her voice cracking slightly under the room's sudden judgment. Someone in the back muttered, "This is insane," and I realized public opinion was finally, quietly, turning against her. The next morning, I drove to my office and finally opened the case file I'd been avoiding for weeks. My colleague Marcus had flagged a pattern. Multiple HOA discrimination complaints nationwide traced back to consultants Karen had hired. Karen wasn't just a rogue HOA president. She'd built a small business coaching boards on legally skirting disability accommodations. I pulled county records showing Karen had drafted nearly identical bylaws for 3 other HOAs, each targeting disabled homeowners. Worse, HOA financial records revealed thousands in consulting fees paid to Karen's own company. A clear conflict of interest. I contacted our office's Civil Rights Division, laying out potential ADA violations alongside possible fraud within the HOA's finances. That evening, Karen escalated one final time, filing to have our therapy van towed from our own driveway. The tow truck arrived at dawn, Karen supervising personally, filming triumphantly as if capturing a long-awaited victory lap. I stepped outside in my work suit, badge visible, and asked the driver to please pause before hooking up. Karen's smug expression flickered, confusion crossing her face as she noticed the federal seal on my identification. "You're a lawyer," she stammered, suddenly aware something had shifted dramatically beneath her feet, though not fully understanding yet. "I'm the United States attorney handling ADA compliance cases," I said quietly. "And you've just given me quite a file." Karen laughed nervously, insisting it was all just neighborhood business, her voice losing its usual commanding certainty entirely. "This isn't neighborhood business anymore," I replied. "It's a federal civil rights violation, documented for months now." The tow driver quietly disconnected the van, sensing the situation had outgrown his simple assignment entirely. Neighbors gathered on porches, drawn by the commotion, watching Karen's carefully constructed authority crumble in real time. "You can't do this," Karen insisted, though her voice wavered, betraying the panic beneath her rigid composure. "I already did," I said, gesturing to Sophia's shredded therapy papers still taped inside a labeled evidence bag. "Those very papers, torn on our porch weeks earlier, became Exhibit A in the federal complaint I filed that afternoon." Word spread through Maple Creek instantly, neighbors messaging each other, stunned that the quiet Reyes family held such power. Priya texted immediately, admitting she'd always suspected something was off about how confidently Karen skirted every real consequence. Frank called too, offering to testify about his own ramp removal, finally unafraid of Karen's dwindling influence. The Ortegas came forward with their service dog fine, adding another documented incident to the growing federal case file. Within days, investigators subpoenaed HOA financial records, confirming Karen's consulting fees and the discriminatory bylaw's true intent. Karen tried resigning quietly from the board, hoping distance might shield her from the mounting federal scrutiny closing in. It didn't work. Resignation doesn't erase evidence, and the Department of Justice formally opened an ADA investigation regardless. Local news picked up the story. Headlines reading, "HOA president targeted disabled families, unknowingly confronted U.S. attorney." Karen's consulting business collapsed overnight, former clients scrubbing her name from websites the moment the story broke. Dale, facing his own scrutiny for financial mismanagement, quickly distanced himself, filing for divorce within the month. The HOA board voted unanimously to repeal the discriminatory bylaw, publicly apologizing to every family Karen had targeted. Karen faced civil penalties, mandatory disability rights training, and a settlement fund created for every wronged Maple Creek family. She eventually moved away, her for sale sign standing ironically in the very driveway she'd once policed so cruelly. I heard she tried starting over elsewhere, only for old neighbors to recognize her name from the news coverage. Nobody in Maple Creek missed her clipboard, her fines, or the fear that once defined our quiet cul-de-sac. Sophia's ramp stayed exactly where it belonged, and her therapy van parked freely, without threat or judgment ever again. Our community healed slowly, neighbors finally speaking openly about accommodations, empathy replacing the silence Karen had once enforced. Some people learn kindness costs nothing. Karen learned it the hardest way possible. One shredded paper at a time. Then D.